Cracking the Legal Code of King James realityblogger.wordpress.com. The average Christian in this world has been sold on the idea that they can buy their way into heaven, through the middleman salesman priest of their prospective church and its particular doctrine, as if this will somehow wash away their sins just like the 3 credit rating agencies can magically wipe away a bad credit score. If I were a man on the street and I made the claim that for $100 I could save your soul by somehow bypassing God himself and his wrathful judgment, I'd be locked up in the nearest asylum, run by nuns, and charged with conspiracy to defraud the public. But if I incorporate and call myself a 501c3 religion, suddenly that same sales pitch becomes authorized by law and fervently protected by government, all 40,000 of them. But did anyone ever do their due diligence and check the Bible to see if this was actually what's supposed to happen? Does the definition of what a Christian is and which path he or she is supposed to walk have anything to do with a corporate religion, a religious doctrine, a constitution of legal de facto government, or even a church? Can a man buy love, purchase forgiveness, tithe for his sins with the money of Caesar, government, and then step up to knock on heaven's door in forgiveness of these biblical no-nos? Can a church give men license to sin in exchange for the payment of blessings from priests in ceremonial robes? Surprisingly, the answers to all of these questions within the Bible are both shocking and beautiful. And they all begin with the words absolutely not. The Bible does not say these things, and it does not bestow status on men to act in God's or Jesus Christ's name as a vicar, replacement, which is surprisingly the claimed basis of all legal authority in religion and government, church and state. But the church and state sure wants you to think it does. Words like saved, salvation, and redemption are part of an alternative language not taught to most church-going folks, for these are the words of attorneys and lawyers, the language of secret societies and orders that seek power and control through government, mind control, of the masses, so that we may never be free from the self-imposed debt that can only be forgiven through the comprehension of the Bible and its legal interpretation. The first time I even began to contemplate the power of the Bible was when a friend entered the whole Bible as evidence of his client's personal credo of law into a federal court, and it was accepted and honored without question. Then, some time later, I was approached by a man who tried to convince me to do what he was doing, which was to copy what the wealthy and the no-business elite do. He explained that the registrar loved it when the elitist few brought in the King James, authorized 1611 Bible and claimed it as law, utilizing it in the creation of a trust to turn the artificial person, straw man, attached as the surname into a not-for-profit corporation, where the new trust controlled the name, and then proceeded to show me all of the IRS tax forms that these society men utilized to get all of their tax dollars back in redemption at the end of each year. All of this was based on entering the legally authorized Bible as evidence of law. And while at first I was intrigued, I quickly realized this road was not for me, and that it was steeped in comprehensible participation of the fraud of the system. I chose not to benefit from this organized corruption. And the secretive gent has never contacted me again, asking me not to share what he told me. I later learned that the word trust, as do many words in the legal language, means the opposite of its vernacular common usage. It goes something like this: greater than a trust maxim of law, when someone is in possession of something which they do not have a legal right to, then they are the trustee of that thing. Needless to say, this made me want to learn more about this Bible and how it was being used in law. And this began a journey of discovery and actualization that I never thought I'd take. I started reading the Bible and cross-referencing the words with the legal language of the Law Society. And what I found was an exact match. Before we can understand how to use the language of the Bible as a remedy in law, we must first define legally the words of that sacred book so as to comprehend the legal process hidden within. For they are of the same language. Only then can we be successful in the utilization of the Bible as a legal remedy within the legal language of the Law Society to escape the laws of man and mammon. In truth, anyone who has read the Bible will need to reread it once they learn this dualistic legal code, which naturally is the code of church and state. It is ironic, really, that the powers that be, church and state, have divided these two languages of man's legal law and the Bible. To create this division in the understanding of men through this separation of the togetherness of church and state, which both claim the same authority to rule men under God's name under oath, defined as taking God's name in vain, the separation of the temporal and the spiritual had to be accomplished. I now understand that this was an important step in conquering the minds of men within the powerful G20 Gentile 20 nations. We must understand that there is no true redemption for mankind in the temporal, non-spiritual, legal law alone, for the law of men only deals with strawmen, artificial persons as corporations that are created as fictions of law and owned through letters patent by government, where the spirituality of the soul is rejected as being encased within the vessel, legal body of man. Thus a living spiritually inclined man will never find true remedy in legal law alone while acting as a legal fictional person under man's laws, and certainly not in the Constitution that created that legal fiction. For God's laws and nature itself have no place in fiction except in name, noun only. On the other hand, there is the Bible, to which the priests in their own religious societies never reveal the true legal language of that sacred tome. So it is equally accurate to say that no fictional person or citizen of a soulless state will ever find remedy within the Bible, for the Bible is for the sentient and stateless mankind alone, and persons are mere legal fictions of mankind, secular government, that are not to be respected according to the Bible. Thus a citizen, person, an enfranchised man, will never be able to utilize the Bible as remedy, for persons, names, have no essence or soul, and are not found in nature, where the Bible exclaims as the natural law of God. Persons are creations of law, of man's law, not God. And yet the priest class continuously bombard their parishioners with fallacy-confiding patriotism through God's will for legal law issued by government man, as the law of the land, when in fact all the earth and land is under the law of God and nature, as God's creation not man's. But the bridge between the linguistic code written in the Bible and what is written in the legal code is never crossed while educating the masses. Church and state are indeed one, and cannot be separated, for the authority of all law is based on God's authority ceded to men. Indeed, if this relationship were ever discovered, all good men would turn away from fiction and choose to be free under God's law and no longer be enslaved by man's legal fiction, exactly as the Bible instructs us to escape. And no slaves would be left to run the machine of mammon, money. I am well on my way to cracking this code, and so I want to share with you what I've uncovered so far. Whatever your opinion or beliefs about religion and the Bible are, they do not apply here. I'm not interested in proving the existence of anything but what exists in nature that can be proven. The nature of God or lack thereof is for you to decide individually, and has absolutely no relevance within this discussion. The words we will be defining here are straight out of the Bible and the legal dictionaries of government. When you comprehend that these things are one and the same, and that the Bible is the hidden authority of the laws of the men in government and religion, you will have your own revelation that I cannot imagine one to be able to put into words. The word abandon, for instance, may be defined as two seemingly opposite concepts. Abandon on one hand means totally free and unhindered expression of will, while in the same definition it may also mean to leave something behind. But for our purposes, we must certainly combine these definitions in our comprehension that in order to be free and unhindered in our lives as free men, in abandon, under God, under the laws of nature, we must also abandon and leave behind permanently the ties that bind us in chains of debt and obligation to government, mammon. In other words, we must abandon our person so as to 100% of the time act as living beings, in abandon. A man that carries a commercial entity in the form of an artificial person in commerce with government, mammon, in truth carries around a demon, and therefore cannot live life in abandon. Webster's 1828 dictionary defines the word demon as, signifying an evil spirit or genius, which influences the conduct or directs the fortunes of mankind. And just what exactly is an evil genius? Genius, n. Latin from the root of gigno, gr, to beget. 1. Among the ancients, a good or evil spirit or demon supposed to preside over a man's destiny in life, that is, to direct his birth and actions and be his guard and guide, a tutelary deity, the ruling and protecting power of men, places or things. This seems to be merely a personification or deification of the particular structure or bent of mind which a man receives from nature, which is the primary signification of the word. 2. The peculiar structure of mind which is given by nature to an individual, or that disposition or bent of mind which is peculiar to every man, and which qualifies him for a particular employment, a particular natural talent or aptitude of mind for a particular study or course of life, as a genius for history, for poetry or painting. 3. Strength of mind, uncommon powers of intellect, particularly the power of invention. In this sense we say, Homer was a man of genius. Hence, 4. A man endowed with uncommon vigor of mind, a man of superior intellectual faculties. Shakespeare was a rare genius. Webster's 1828, an evil genius, demon, might be one who, let's say, creates a doctrine of Christian religion that goes completely against the teachings of the character of Jesus Christ, incorporates that doctrine into a corporate church, and then deceives all the followers of that religion that its word is not only of and inspired by God, but that his genius is the only true interpretation of the will of God as God's spokesman and author. And thus one of 1,000 religions is born, completely hiding the fact that religion, ceremony, symbols, and mammon is forbidden in the Bible for true followers of the legal and spiritual story of Jesus Christ and its guidance to be free from the influences and enslavement of the church and state. And rest assured here that a demon, genius, needs no wings, horns, or claws as depicted in ancient artifacts. These are just frightening imagery to scare children and adults into never perceiving that ordinary men like themselves could be so evil and demonic in their genius. They live among us, controlling us, feeding off of our collective ignorance, harvesting our wealth and happiness, and they are just as human as you and me. They are as we are, simply of Adam. Adam, N. In Heb, man, primarily, the name of the human species, mankind, appropriately, the first man, the progenitor of the human race. The word signifies form, shape, or suitable form, hence, species. It is evidently connected with Heb, to be like or equal, to form an image, to assimilate. Whence the sense of likeness, image, form, shape, a body, like. See man, Webster's 1828. As we can read here and within the Bible concordances, the word Adam is plural. It is representative of all mankind as a species. But more importantly, it represents within the Bible the status of mankind before being enslaved by diminishing legal statuses, names, such as person, citizen, American, debtor, or slave. Yet, what does your priest sell to you every Sunday, hoping you never learn the true language of the Bible of the state of the kings? That Adam should be anthropomorphized as a single man? I do not claim to be a genius, and would avoid any demon that claims such notion for him or herself. For that is just a false title not of nature. I have no religion to sell, and I want none of your money or your pledged oath in exchange for this sharing of work. I give it freely in the hopes of breaking away the supposed mysteries of the Bible and revealing what it truly is to be free and to live in peace among all men under its teachings. For all men must know these words or be permanently stuck in their already existing bondage to the religion of church and state. Ultimately, church and state are the same thing, where nowadays one is incorporated within the other, laughably calling themselves non-profits. Perhaps non-profits would be more like it. In short, I want to help you to save you from your fictional self. I want you to stop taking part in your own demonic possession of an artificial person. Remember the popular axiom that possession is 9/10 of the law? Well, this really means that the law is worthless unless you possess and appear by name as the person belonging to government, the legal fiction that the government's fictional laws only apply to. You see, the laws of men do not apply to you, unless you claim and possess man's fictional demon, citizen, as your person. 9/10 of man's law, in other words, is only applicable to the government's own property, the artificial person you possess called a citizen, creating a contractual obligation to follow the laws of man's government over God's. The laws of government, Satan, govern only persons, demons, not living men. Not dissimilarly, the rules and regulations of Walmart employees only regulate the demon person created as and called the employee, another artificial status of personhood. No man is bound by the rules of any corporation unless they are employed by that corporation, including all of the municipalities and offices of government, the corporation nation. If you are employed, you are possessing an additional legal fictional status added to a person called an employee. Possession, N. The having, holding or detention of property in one's power or command, actual seizing or occupancy, either rightful or wrongful. One man may have the possession of a thing, and another may have the right of possession or property. In bailment, the bailee, who receives goods to convey, or to keep for a time, has the possession of the goods, and a temporary right over them, but not the property. Property in possession includes both the right and the occupation. 2. Anything valuable possessed or enjoyed. Christian peace of mind is the best possession of life. 3. The state of being under the power of demons or invisible beings, madness, lunacy, as demoniacal possession. To take possession to enter on, or to bring within one's power or occupancy. To give possession to put in another's power or occupancy. Webster's 1828, employment, N. The act of employing or using. 1. Occupation, business, that which engages the head or hands, as agricultural employments, mechanical employments. Men, whose employment is to make sport and amusement for others, are always despised. 2. Office, public business or trust, agency or service for another or for the public. The Secretary of the Treasury has a laborious and responsible employment. He is in the employment of government. Webster's 1828. To be employed is to be in service as a debtor and taxpayer to government. It is to be employed through mammon, using the invisible being described above as a demon that the man possess in person, in name, and is employed, used, under the power of that demonic possession. The person employed is a material possession of government. Employ, v.t. Latin plico. 1. To occupy the time, attention and labor of, to keep busy, or at work, to use. A portion of time should be daily employed in reading the scriptures, meditation and prayer. A great portion of life is employed to little profit or to very bad purposes. 2. To use as an instrument or means. We employ pens in writing, and arithmetic in keeping accounts. We employ medicines in curing diseases. 3. To use as materials in forming anything. We employ timber, stones or bricks, in building. We employ wool, linen and cotton, in making cloth. 4. To engage in one's service, to use as an agent or substitute in transacting business. 5. To occupy, to use, to apply or devote to an object, to pass in business, as, to employ time, to employ an hour, a day or a week, to employ one's life. To employ one's self, is to apply or devote one's time and attention, to busy one's self. N. That which engages the mind, or occupies the time and labor of a person, business, object of study or industry, employment. 1. Occupation, as art, mystery, trade, profession. 2. Public office, agency, service for another. Webster's 1828. Engage, v.t. 1. To make liable for a debt to a creditor, to bind one's self as surety. 2. To pawn, to stake as a pledge. 3. To enlist, to bring into a party, as, to engage men for service, to engage friends to aid in a cause. 6. To unite and bind by contract or promise. Nations engage themselves to each other by treaty. 8. To occupy, to employ assiduously. Webster's 1828. As a citizen, you are employing, using, and occupying in trust the person owned by government, and are therefore agreeing to its rules, codes. When the concept of the mark of the beast is considered, we must realize that it has become increasingly difficult to find employment without the mark of the government name, which is representative of the social security number of the government beast. Thus, buying and selling, commerce, are also regulated by the beast, requiring the name and number. So will you be used, employed, simply to bow down to the beast. In a corporation, your person is the tool being employed, used, for your actual time and labor as a man, connected as surety to the person. Thus you are a human tool no less artificial, soulless, non-sentient than a pen or a brick being used in business. A slave has no God-given, inherent rights, not even a paid one. For an employee is always a person not a man, and a person has no unalienable rights. A corporation hires the demon, surname of the person, and you work to satisfy the obligation of the demon in contractual employment. So what is your occupation? If your answer is a licensed doctor, attorney, or an unlicensed busboy or garbage man, or any other one of a million legal tax-paying occupations, then you are using a legal title, status, of government regulated under a person with the status of employee of government while under its tax code, receiving a pension from government via your tax contributions to Social Security. This investment in insurance and the future receivership of benefits from that Social Security trust binds you to the federal income tax as a beneficiary of that insurance trust and its future benefit payments. That's why they say that the income tax is voluntary, because you volunteer just by being and possessing an employed citizen instead of yourself, and government's property, the person, employee, is obligated in that debt with you as surety. This is the price of being possessed. The demon, person, brings the man out of nature and into government's hell on earth. And what is hell, really? Are we to take the Bible literally in its allegory of a dystopian underworld where fire and brimstone burns sinners for the rest of time after they depart the earth in physical form? Of course not. The body remains, so what's left to burn? The fable of hell is simply the allegory of the unnatural, legally dead, state of being a debtor, as all persons, citizens, of government are. The United States is an open-air prison for debtors, and all citizens are indeed legally classified as debtors. Sure, you must be considered legally dead to go to hell, but hell is not referencing the afterlife. You are born alive, a pure and innocent child of God, and are then immediately delivered into hell by your birth certificate, your registration as a visitor to hell on earth, thus creating your artificial status here as a person, citizen. We are still alive within the hell on this earth, and our possession in artificial personhood makes us a citizen of hell. Afterlife is just a clever allegory for being set free from a life lived while imitating a fictional person, and doing so as a debtor in hell. Hell, the name given to a place under the exchequer chamber, where the king's debtors were confined. Rich. Diet. Black's 4rth edition, Ballantyne's, hell was a dungeon for those who did not pay their debts to the government kingdom. Today, to be under the U.S. Constitution, a debt compact, as a constitutor debtor, simply means to be a debtor under contractual obligation. Since all citizens are debtors, the jurisdiction of the United States in its entirety is really just one giant open-air debtor's prison. In other words, hell. Why do I claim this to be so? It's simple if you understand the nature of the US dollar, which is nothing more or less than a promise to pay a debt. Do you actually believe that you can pay a debt with another debt promised to pay? If no debt can ever be paid, because there is no lawful money in existence within the debtor nation, then how can a citizen person ever be anything else but a debtor that can never pay his or her debt? Our particular version of a living hell as debtors persons is that hell is indeed eternal as long as we accept citizenship and are possessed of such fictional obligations like the national debt. There is no escaping hell as long as we consent to respecting persons of any kind, including government, church, and all other corporations of any function. These are all persons. Our eternity on this earth will last until we die from an accidental or natural death, a death of the flesh and blood. But these artificial persons are all created as dead financial instruments, debtors, and government remedies can only be of comfort to the dead. Government can only summon the dead person to court with a legal fiction summons. The hell of indebtedness is perpetual and eternal for all persons, and we cannot escape hell because there is no actual remedy or way to ever pay your national debt, since the money is already debt-based. To have eternal life, as the allegory of the Bible tells us over and over, we cannot respect persons, we cannot admit of being debtors. We must always remain living men in and of nature with unalienable rights under God. We must not contract with the synagogue of Satan, man as adversary to God, to go under the devil's, man's, law. This guarantees us eternal life on earth, not in some incomprehensible afterlife. You might call this hidden utopia, heaven on earth. Again, this is simply allegory for not accepting contracts as dead pledges and other legal personifications of our living souls into fiction characters in Satan's, man as adversary to God, plan. Some may think this amounts to mere anarchy, or a life without government, the meaning of that word. Most can't imagine that instead this amounts to mere Christianity, the following of the teachings of the character Jesus Christ in self-government. But then most have thrown out the Bible without reading it with contemplation, or have read it without understanding its legal language. You who are on the road must have a code that you can live by. Teach your children well, their father's hell will surely go by. CSNY lyrics. To have and to hold heaven on earth, man must have logical and reasonable rules, a code, to abide by, and must agree amongst themselves to follow those unalienable truths in nature in order to live in peace and to protect themselves, their neighbors, and the very earth they claim as home together, heaven. This is the essence of the Bible, the essence of following the laws of nature. How difficult would this really be to accomplish, compared to the millions of codes and statutes of man that no one can ever comprehend, let alone count? Well, try this one all-encompassing law on for size. Do no harm. That's it. Sweet and simple. In fact, any law that man can create for the actual benefit of society would automatically fall under this simple maxim. In a shocking paradox to this simple truth, most of man's laws create the opposite, a license and permission to break God's commandments and natural law and thus to legally harm other persons, which directly affects the natural man possessed of that person in surety. This is indeed just an end-run-around responsibility to your fellow man for your own actions, a way to cause harm and get off the hook for it. And this is truly anti-Christ. The following words are defined for the benefit of the reader who wishes to finally bring logic and reason to the rhetoric and allegory of the Bible, the officially authorized legal presentation and evidence testament of law, issued by King James, 1611. The following is not religion, and in point of fact is quite far from it. For the Bible is not about religion, and is in fact surprisingly shunning of such corporate things as religion and government. Religions and their proclaimed doctrines are built around and very much in spite of the Bible's words. Religions indeed existed long before the Bible was ever written, and have created many gods and tools of control over the ages. Thus religion and the Bible are not synonymous in any way, except for the claims made by religions and governments. Both are churches known as corporation souls, to the contrary, in order to control the information we are about to uncover. Information is power. Power, authority of law, is control. And ignorance enslaves those without knowledge, causing them to perish. As we delve into the true meaning of the scriptures, defined as ancient written knowledge and understanding, not necessarily of religion, we discover that quite shockingly there are no true biblical Christians in America. Amazingly, the very book to prove this statement has all along been the very Bible that corporate churches twist and use to mislead good people into a state of anti-Christian thought, behavior, custom, and lifestyle. It is indeed ironic that the atheist's greatest weapon against religion turns out to be the Bible itself. But how do men of any religious or non-religious claim use it correctly to defeat those men who act as gods on earth with the usurped authority of that book? For the critic and non-believer, the following legal understanding of the words in that Bible is perhaps the greatest tool against organized corporate religion and government available, as presented in our dictionaries. For incredibly, even that word, believer, is a legal term, and means something other than what religion proclaims. And what is more religiously doctrinal than the belief in the legitimacy of government and the patriotic indoctrination that is created from it? As it stands, the average citizen person of the United States or any other government for that matter does the following. They believe in government, as if it were not a work of fiction, a corporation, person. They have faith in government, placing all love and devotion within this artificial thing. They have trust in government, a financial bond enslaving them as surety to things unnatural. They declare a pledge of fealty, allegiance, to government, salute its war flag, and even invoke the name of God to justify man's authority over God, nature. They obey the millions of commandments, legal laws, of government, which issues them license to sin against the laws and commandments of nature, God's law. They seek remedy, redemption, and salvation in government, which can only offer such things to artificial persons, not men. These are legal terms. They plead to government in its courts, asking fictional characters to judge their actions instead of God. They are servants, in servitude, to that government fiction, disobeying the laws of nature as a requirement of tenure. They consider government as their master, and even bless it in prayer to God, though it was created by men. They worship government's paper constitution as if it were the Bible, claiming it to be inspired by God and even claiming rights from it above God, even though it is patently against everything written in the Bible. See the similarities here? The question is, why is it so easy to believe in an absolutely known fiction called government and yet the same belief and faith in our tangible nature all around us and the laws of its creator are labeled as silly and fictional? What is real, the grass that grows or the municipal corporation, city, codes that regulate its growth? What is fiction, the legal codes of government or the omnipresence of nature all around us? Your answer depends solely on the disposition of your soul. Are you a natural man, being human, or are you I am person aiding an artificial, fictional person like a demon? Imagine if instead of teasing or demeaning people for having a spiritual connection to nature in the form of a belief in God as if God was the reality of nature, misguided as some may be, you teased people for believing in government instead, which by its own laws, definitions, and admission in its own courts is a complete and utter fictional story requiring consent and acceptance to its purely imaginary, contractual existence? Ha ha ha. You believe in government? What an idiot. It doesn't even exist in nature. Even it doesn't believe it exists. Lol. I guarantee that this is exactly what the powers that be in government and religion say behind your backs as they strip you of your life, liberty, prosperity, and happiness. Of course, they tell you that these traits are protected under the Constitution even as they take them from you at will, paying you money that says, "In God we trust." And indeed they are protected by the Constitution if you are a responsible living man under God as it states, but not if you foolishly become a citizen and give up those natural unalienable rights in a permissive and obligatory contract to government to possess a subjected person, demon, of government that have no unalienable rights. In other words, men and people are not the same thing. Only men, not people, are listed as having unalienable rights. They are tricky like that. In truth, the answer is now clear to me, though it has taken my whole life to fall upon such comprehension. It's a simple case of mistaken identity. Men believe that they truly are the artificial person they pretend to be, which is in fact property of government. Like an actor believes he is the character he plays on the stage to improve the performance, men forget they are natural beings, which are property of God, nature, and instead abandon the laws of nature, God, by accepting an immense legal doctrine from government, much worse than any religious one. Government is simply a godless religion. Living men destroy nature, God's kingdom, by not being in their own minds but act in that of their citizen person, doing so without conscience as artificial representatives of themselves, as citizens. They refer to their actions as they've been brainwashed to do, using patriotic terms like civil liberties, civil rights, liberty, and freedom, all legal privileges of persons, and they do so under the banner, flag, of their fictional master, a government that protects the actions of these demons, citizens, by granting licenses to kill, to steal, to rape, to pillage, to plunder, and to blaspheme all that is sacred in nature, under God's dominion and law. Blasphemy in the legal fiction is again a legal term, meaning crime against the church and state. Belief and faith in government is the belief and faith trust that man is God, contractually speaking. And with no higher authority, men through government may control other men in spite of God and nature, and in spite of the Bible's teachings that this is an unnatural status that can only exist through the respect of persons. Under God a man is only ever himself, and has no person to hide himself away from his responsibilities. He or she acknowledges his or her actions and takes responsibility for them as forgiveness for his sin against nature, legally known as restitution. Thus the man has no need of the laws of other men, Satan, for he belongs to God, and need not be compelled to take responsibility for harm. Under government, as a citizen, it is quite the opposite. Man hides behind his or her artificial person, and the crimes against nature, including to other men, are forgiven only by government, for the fictional person belongs to the fictional government, and crime is against persons, not men. Like a puppet, man inhabits the person and acts under it, taking man outside of God's protection of true law. In other words, as a person, man must give up all rights under God, man's unalienable inherent rights, for government law is always anti-nature, anti-God, anti-Christ, and can never be inherent, for those rights are copyrighted fictions of man, and are always artificial, opposed to nature, not inherent. Government-granted rights are to persons, not men, including those people, of the Constitution. And so for a man to answer for his or her crimes, he or she must embrace this fact and stand in person, impersonation, on an actor's stage called a court, not as a human being, but by possessing a demon person. This is called representation. In order to use and operate a government citizen, demon, artificial person, a man must represent him or herself not as a human, but as that demon. The man represents and is bound in surety to the actions of the artificial person. Representation of persons, a fiction of the law, the effect of which is to put the representative in the place, degree, or right of the person represented. Civil Code Law, Art. 894. Black's first edition, represent, v, t, s as z. Latin represento, re and Low Latin presenter, from presens, present. 1. To show or exhibit by resemblance. 4. To personate, to act the character or to fill the place of another in a play, as, to represent the character of King Richard. 5. To supply the place of, to act as a substitute for another. The Parliament of Great Britain represents the nation. The Congress of the United States represents the people or nation. The Senate is considered as representing the states in their corporate capacity. 7. To stand in the place of, in the right of inheritance. As we study the words in the Bible, we slowly comprehend that the Bible is not at all about death or about a mystical life after our physical departure from this earth, for it was written by men who had only but lived here on earth and could not have reasonably known God or an afterlife. Instead, the Bible is an allegorical instruction book about how to live on this earth, within the constructs of nature, without religion and without government, and yet to adhere to the laws of nature so as to preserve and live healthy lives. It is a story about living life in the fullest. Ironically, to inhabit and impersonate an artificial person is in fact to accept death, fiction, and to oppose life, nature. There is no life or nature within legal statutes, and I'm sure I don't have to convince anyone by now that a fictional person is not alive. Ultimately, the Bible offers two paths, one of grace, life, in nature under God's law, and one of fiction, death, within church and state under man's legal fiction, mammon, and it leaves that choice up to the individual. It's all about choice, a choice between two rulers, God, law of nature, and Satan, law of man. Grace or disgrace. Of course, in modern times this knowledge is lost on men, and is hidden by both the church and the states, forced government education, either purposefully, Vatican, or through ignorance, small local churches of any denomination. I realize now that men have been thrown into citizenship without ever being truly provided with a consenting choice. In this way, men are created, represented, as Gentiles, Goyim, which is defined as people, the common mass of peasantry and lowest status of person. We are acting as the synagogue wishes us to act, in the capacity of its property through impersonation. This creates inequity on a grand scale, which we ironically call legal equality, and confers a concentration of power unprecedented in history that milks public wealth to its own ends. As persons, we have no sex, no race, no specialness, no culture. We are equal in our corporate blandness and rights, a machine. This unnatural state is exactly what the Bible warns against, an army of dead persons, the dead walking the earth. That's us. The Bible is an instruction book on being free in life, not death. It instructs us on being responsible for our own actions within a state of love and protection to all men with sanctity of the same rights and duty to others. It tells us how to protect nature and the laws governing our use of earth while we are here, as well as each other. It advises us on avoiding the bondage and servitude of the corporate institutions that would otherwise use that book of God's natural law to entrap and enfranchise the whole of mankind into bonded servitude to a small minority of men, a synagogue of Satan, against nature in the world of corporate fiction, which is often interpreted by fools to be the sole basis of the book as a justification of the evils of the church. Of course, to understand evil, one must describe it and how to avoid it. What is evil? Evil, n. Evil is natural or moral. Natural evil is anything which produces pain, distress, loss or calamity, or which in any way disturbs the peace, impairs the happiness, or destroys the perfection of natural beings. Moral evil is any deviation of a moral agent from the rules of conduct prescribed to him by God, or by legitimate human authority, or it is any violation of the plain principles of justice and rectitude. There are also evils called civil, which affect injuriously the peace or prosperity of a city or state, and political evils, which injure a nation, in its public capacity. All wickedness, all crimes, all violations of law and right are moral evils. Diseases are natural evils, but they often proceed from moral evils. 2. Misfortune, mischief, injury. There shall no evil befall thee. Psalms 91:10. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 3. 3. Depravity, corruption of heart, or disposition to commit wickedness, malignity. Satan is and describes man. The concept of Satan is not some pitchfork demon as portrayed in a child's story told to frighten the children of men till they die, in order to compel their obedience to obey church doctrine and government legality. It is not a he or a she. It is a descriptive word for the concept of influence of all men against nature, against God, and the laws of nature. Satan, noun, heb, an adversary. The grand adversary of man, the devil or prince of darkness, the chief of the fallen angels. Devil, n. devl. Latin, to calumniate. 1. In the Christian theology, an evil spirit or being, a fallen angel, expelled from heaven for rebellion against God, the chief of the apostate angels, the implacable enemy and tempter of the human race. In the New Testament, the word is frequently and erroneously used for demon. 2. A very wicked person, and in ludicrous language, and great evil. In profane language, it is an expletive expressing wonder, vexation, etc. 3. An idol, or false god. Leviticus chapter 17 verse 7. 2 Chronicles chapter 11 verse 15. As we can read, the word Satan refers to the Hebrew word for the adversary of man. Like the word demon, there is no supernatural quackery here. The Bible allegory uses fire and brimstone to describe men of unfettered evil genius that are adversarial to nature and life, and therefore must place other men in bondage and surety to them through the concepts of government and religion. Monsanto, Raytheon, Bank of America, the Vatican, the City of London, Washington, D.C., these are the personifications of men in rebellion against God, nature, idols of false gods. Mere men. Satan incarnate. So far, the synagogue of Satan has suppressed not only the Bible's teachings, but also the path to abandon of all mankind from government. It has created in men a false status misleadingly called Christianity, that under church doctrine follow government as the law of the land while abusing and usurping God's creation, nature. In truth, every action of today's modern Christian is against the teachings of the Bible and its Christ character. Where there is no free agency, there can be no morality. Where there is no temptation, there can be little claim to virtue. Where the routine is rigorously proscribed by law, the law, and not the man, must have the credit of the conduct. William H. Prescott, History of the Conquest of Peru, 1847. Here are just some of the religious, legal words that in actuality are quite opposed to religion, to government, and that are designed to make all men free in their comprehension by and through the allegory of the Bible. The following are taken from Webster's 1828 Dictionary of the American Language unless otherwise